There was a jock and a Greek who were applying for the same job. So they went in, and the employer gave them this test. And so they sat down next to each other, and they took the test and handed it in. And then the next day they came back in, and the employer had, graded the test. And he stood up before him, and he said, I got to be honest with you, both of you got the same score. He said, but I decided to hire the geek. And the jock was, very taken back by that. And he said, don't you think that's prejudice or something to do that? And the boss said, he said, let me tell you what happened. He said, both of your papers were right all the way through until the last question. And the geek answered, I don't know. And then when I looked at your paper, you answered, me either. Emily Cady, in her book Lessons in Truth, talks about, actually she opens the book up this way, talks about our life as a journey from sense consciousness to Christ consciousness. That really that's what we're here to do, is to make that journey through that process. And the Bible actually is the story of that journey. It actually shows up in the context of taking us from being totally into our senses, into our five senses, to the process and the challenges and the issues and the circumstances and the tragedies and all of the stuff that shows up in our experience, all the way through to the emergence of the Christ message and energy and consciousness that shows up in our life. And so when we look at the Bible, it's a powerful story of that journey and how that journey unfolds in our life. And the Hebrew people, or the Israelites, were sort of the focal point of that journey. They were the chosen people. Now, I sort of have this sense that they weren't chosen because of some higher sort of speciality around them, that there needed to be a group of people around which the story took place. And so it had to be somebody. It could have been any group of people, but this group of people had a particular religious energy about them, and so they were chosen in the context of the story of the Bible to show that process, to live that process. And it's not necessarily doesn't necessarily feel like a blessing to be chosen. And if you think about the life that they've had to experience and the issues that have shown up and the challenges and so on and so forth, you might say, well, gee, that wasn't necessarily a good thing. But the other side of that is that also has been jealousy and all the kinds of energies that have shown up around having been chosen. What we understand is the story needed to be told. The journey needed to be created, and there's a lot of responsibility that showed up in the context of being in that situation, and there's a lot of pride and responsibility as well. So we can stand here and look at that story and say, that's my story. That's the story of my life unfolding and my journey from sense consciousness to Christ consciousness, to that higher level of thinking. And so one of our challenges is that we often compare ourselves. If our life is a journey of thinking, if it's a journey of awareness, if it's a journey of our inner thought process, which is what we talk about here in Unity, if that's really where the journey takes place, that this is only a reflection or a way in which we can look at the journey, but if it takes place within ourselves, then one of the challenges is that we have is when we get pulled into this journey of the senses and we begin to compare ourselves to others and how their life is, and what's showing up for them, and am I doing well enough? Am I measuring up? Am I fitting in? Am I? And so we get into that whole place. And we want a template. There's this part of us that wants this template for the perfect journey. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like we want the steps, or the how-tos, or this is the way it should go, or this is what I should be experiencing, or this is how I can visualize that particular journey. And there's a right way and there's a wrong way. And I want to know what the right way is so I can do the right way. And the truth is, as I experience it, is that the journeys are individual. That we all have our own journey. We all have our own process. We all have our own experiences that we are drawing to ourselves and embracing ourselves and unfolding in our life. And so our journey is unique. And so as we watch the journey of the Hebrews and the Israelites unfold, we can take our journey and impose it in there and see how, and it gives us support and encouragement and some ways in which we can bring ourselves to a higher level of thinking. That I don't want to do this. I don't want to have to defeat Goliath. Or I have the courage to do that. Or I can get my rocks and put them in my pouch. And those 5 rocks, those principles that I know, I can use those to move through the experiences of my life in a unique way. So the journey to Christ consciousness is how we show up in the context of our experiences. That's the journey. How do I show up in the context of my experience? Not how do I fit into a template, or how am I measuring up against my neighbor or the person sitting next to me in the pew, but how am I showing up in my life? See, there's not a perfect life. There's only your life. There's not a perfect reality. There's only your reality. And we were born, we came into this world as innocent, sweet, joy-filled, loving babies. Perfect prop, right? Babies. To see the innocence and the joy. And so we were joy-filled. We came into this world joy-filled, open. And the world shows up, and our joy, little by little, often is killed. We go from joy-filled to joy-killed because we're focused on the outer world, the senses, and things show up in our life, and there are abuses, and there are name-calling, and there are all the things that happen in our life experience, whether they're at this level or whether they're at this level. We all experience a certain amount of that in our experience. And so life shows up, and our joy is killed. And we long, as we grow up, we long, and we look back and we say, gosh, I wish I would have had the perfect childhood. Whatever that perfect childhood is. Or I wish I could have the perfect relationship, whatever that relationship is. Or I wish I could have the perfect job, whatever that perfect job is. Or I wish, and we spend our life looking for joy, looking for an experience, looking for a feeling, looking for a sense of confidence, or looking for something in that realm. And so, or maybe it's we're looking for a lightheartedness. Maybe our life is heavy, or maybe the joy that's been killed is a weight that's carrying us down. A friend of mine who's a therapist, her name is Carrie Joyce, and she wrote a book called Choosing Lightheartedness. And she says in the book, she said, lightheartedness is a state of being where you feel love, joy, peace, and laughter as the norm in your everyday life. It doesn't mean you don't have challenges. Everyone has challenges in life. Living lightheartedly just means that no matter what happens, you always know how to bring yourself back to feeling love, joy, peace, and laughter.